Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to the Labyrinth of Thought Podcast. For those who know me, you already know my name, and for those who don't, my name's Bryden Cardillo. This is my first episode of the podcast. In this podcast, I'm kind of delving into mindfulness, philosophy, spirituality, and mental health, and kind of how those things can help us youth make it through the difficulties of growing up. And I'm really grateful to be able to do this. It's something that I've wanted to do for a while now, and I'm very much on the start of my journey down the spiritual path, and it's been an interesting one. There's a lot to learn. And I've seen a lot of good come from it. And I think that being able to give people a platform to find that good, it's something that I would love to be able to say I did. This podcast is being done in collaboration with the Collingwood Youth Center. That's actually where I am right now. I'm in the recording studio there, and I'm very grateful that they could help me with this. But yeah, just going on kind of where my life's at right now. It's been an interesting few months. As you'll kind of see on this podcast, we talk about it a little bit. But I went through kind of about a month-long phase of thinking that I was losing my mind, which was staggeringly false. And it was actually a friend of mine, one of my very best friends, Adrian Dagnillo. I was talking to him about this because I was afraid to talk about it, and I was talking to him about this, and he told me one thing that was very powerful, and it was that if you're really losing your mind, you won't realize it. So I don't know if that can carry into your lives, if you feel the same way, but that was something for me. It's been a crazy few months. My dad got coronavirus. That was an interesting ordeal, having to face some very difficult realities, and especially kind of having reality just throw itself right out in front of you, right out in front of, it was kind of like if you could imagine driving down a dark country road, and then all of a sudden there's a fucking moose right in front of you, and that's what it was like. That situation, finding out that he was going to the hospital. And it definitely brought me to some places which were interesting, and while very shitty, were also pretty constructive in some ways, which were interesting. It was, and we're still in the tail end of it. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now. It's interesting times. So as far as this episode goes, I interview the wonderful Lanee Brown. She is a yoga instructor, and I would argue a spiritual teacher who I met ages ago. And over the summer, I had spent some time practicing yoga with her, practicing asana. We had a little deck by the water where I live, and we'd do a practice a few mornings here and there, and it was really wonderful to get that kind of hands-on experience. Lanee, a little bit of background info on her. So about 20 years ago, Lanee was introduced to Yoga Nidra, and since then she's practiced and studied IREST, or integrative restoration meditation, in depth. After having completed the second level of IREST, Lanee was inspired to read further into non-dual wisdom and tantric philosophy. Lanee is a lifelong learner, and she continues to study Tai Chi, Qigong, and other types of Hatha yoga. When Lanee sent me a little bio on herself, there was this wonderful little quote that she put in at the end. And I think that it's kind of a very potent theme throughout this episode of the podcast. But it goes kind of like this. We can't change the wind, yet we may adjust our sails. And as this podcast goes on, you'll see kind of that idea unroll itself in some ways. But yeah, just remember you guys are beautiful. And here we go on the Labyrinth of Thought podcast with Bryden Cardillo, Lanee Brown. Labyrinth of thought, I'm coming through your eyes. This is Labyrinth of Thought. It's a podcast where we talk to people about things. Labyrinth of Thought. How are you doing today, Lanee?
I am doing exceptionally well because I have started my day off with you.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear that. That's wonderful to hear. So I guess we should get into the swing of things. So I know kind of on this podcast, we're talking towards youth, and one of the feelings that at least I've found myself feeling, and a lot of my friends have as well, is the feeling that we're losing our minds. So, and I can imagine that probably more people than just me and my friends feel that. So I ask, are we all losing our minds?
Well, we actually can't lose our minds. However, there has been quite a change in our minds. As always, I think over human history, we change our minds on the collective conscious and the collective unconscious levels.
Mm-hmm.
Yet at the same time, our minds are our choice of what we think of them, how we perceive them. So if we decide to have a mind that is restless, that's been one of my favorite conditions to visit. If we, on some level, have the experience of having a mind that has had some mental health issue, maybe restlessness is one of those, but something more serious, we may feel that we're losing our minds, but that's just the expression of the mind in that moment. And I think that's why meditation is so valuable, because it helps us understand our minds. It helps us understand that there's more to us than just our minds. And when our minds are starting to feel really weird, which I still remember my teenage years. So yeah, losing my mind was one of the things I felt.
A
and
constant.
To recognize that it's just it's a changing circumstance. It's just for now. It feels like it. We may think it, but it's not happening. Not in the long run.
Not any long. Yeah, that's brilliant. That's a great way to look at it. To look at it, I guess, as from perspective of change, because I guess nothing really is constant in that sense, especially when you're a teenager, because like you start off.
Can't hear you.
You can't hear me? Hello?
Now I can hear you.
Yeah, I think it just cut out for a second. So as I was saying, yeah, I guess it kind of makes sense taking that perspective that you said, or that you kind of explained there, because so many other things are changing in your life that to, I guess, expect that your mind isn't going to change as well is maybe doing a disservice to yourself in a certain way.
Yeah, that's actually, I think that's a good way to express it, because if you don't accept that your mind is going to go through changes, you're not really honoring that aspect of yourself.
Yeah. And maybe you can further, yeah, it can be further elaborated on that you're not taking advantage of such an amazing aspect of yourself, which which is so plentiful in energy, and an aspect of yourself where when you learn how to direct that energy properly, um, can allow you to unlock powers that you originally didn't know you had, or capabilities, if that makes sense. You kind of, when we were speaking earlier, uh, talked about meditation, and you briefly did, just in your kind of little excerpt on losing our minds, and you talked about meditation and what it allows you to do. And if you'd be able to chat about that for a bit, that'd be wonderful.
So my experience with meditation has been over several decades, and I found from my teachers, from students, from colleagues, but mostly from my practical experience, the day-to-day commitment, the discipline, that the mind is, it's just going to be there. It's going to have its thoughts. It's going to have its restlessness. It's going to have its agitations. And the meditation is what helps us accept those things. To commit to just saying, hey, I'm going to just sit here with my mind. Yes, we're still in our bodies. We don't leave those anywhere. And we have all the emotions and the feelings and the sensations. And with our mind, we also have images, symbols, colors. We have lots of things that our mind presents for our experience in this human life. And so if we're not in tune with it, it's hard to be mindful about our life. So we meditate to spend a little time getting a little closer to what is this mind? And there's two minds, from at least from the yogic tradition. I suspect it's considered in many others as well. However, there's the mind that we think about, that we use to, think about our day's activities and, just awareness of what are we doing on the mundane level of things. And then there's the higher mind, and that's the mind that watches the lower mind. And if we don't meditate, and in using that word meditation, that's a whole other discussion maybe, but
Yeah.
if we don't meditate, how do we watch? How do we actually know what our mind is up to, other than eventually, if we're not aware, we will start to have physical manifestations that we don't want to have. We get that restlessness, and we get that lethargy, and we get that upset stomach and that pain in the neck or whatever. And it's because the physical is going to inform us that we didn't pay attention to the mind.
That's interesting. Yeah. I that makes a lot of sense when you say it, when you put it that way. Kind of something that I get from what you were saying is that it's almost like we spend so much time trying to keep ourselves so busy that whenever we fall into this like state of not being busy at all and having nothing to do, we're left alone with our minds, and we go like, holy crap, there's all this stuff going on. I don't know how to deal with it. And it seems like what you're saying is that meditation addresses that.
It allows us to be aware before it becomes a problem. Well, hopefully.
Hopefully, yeah.
That's the intention.
Yeah, because I know, yeah.
Again, after everybody has a different timeline before they get to that point where they can say, oh yeah, I've got this now. Nothing's going to really, knock me off center anymore. Although I don't think there's many people walking the world today that feels that with what is going on. But yeah, the more we are in that centered place of that calm and that peace and that softness and that place that brings out the kindness and compassion in us, we do that for ourselves first so that we can have it overflowing to offer to others. And so I think that's the importance of saying, yes, we are going to feel better. Meditation will help us eventually. It doesn't mean any one meditation is going to be wonderful or any one meditation is going to be terrible. We just don't know what it's going to be. But when we're there and we show up for ourselves, we understand that the benefit is we're going to get to know ourselves more. The old know thyself from all the the religious traditions and the
Yeah.
spiritual teachings. Know thyself. And yeah, we can know that maybe we're getting good grades at school. We can know that we've got a, fantastic date coming up this weekend, or we've got a
Mm-hmm.
wonderful partner to do something with. We can know all those things, but they're not who we are. They are
Yeah.
just a way we're living our life. They're just what we do day to day.
Yeah, and they're more of an extension, I guess, of self.
Mhm.
Like one of I guess when I was younger, and by younger I mean like probably 2 to 3 years ago, um, I used to strongly identify by the things that I did rather than by just I'm Bryden. So it'd be if someone asked me about myself, well, the I would instantaneously before it would just instinctually it would be in sorry, where am I going with this? I would identify with what I do rather than who I am, if that makes sense. So
Oh,
uh,
yes.
I I think the easiest way, the best platform on which that was very obvious was, I guess, even on like my Instagram profile, for example. In my bio, it was just my name and then whatever, skier, horseback rider, skateboarder, like all these things. And funnily enough, that time in my life, although it's never been, everything's changing, that's difficult. That time in my life was exceptionally difficult because I believed that those things were my identity, and I was kind of clung to those. Um, I guess I was kind of clung to those things. Um, and then when like other aspects of my personality started coming up, I started going like, holy crap, that exists, like worried. And then that caused like a little bit of an identity crisis, I guess. If that makes sense.
And it would be a natural outcome if we identify ourselves fully and only to the things that we do, because that is the doing is
Mm-hmm.
very important, what we choose to do and how we do it. There is a right way and a right thing of
Mm-hmm.
action. But it isn't all that we are. It's only a part of us, and it's an expression of who we are. And if
Mm-hmm.
we get so involved in the doing and we don't have the time to watch who is this thing or what is this thing that's doing the doing, we
Yeah.
don't even know who we are. We can't step back and go, oh, wait a minute, this is who I am. And this is the transition from being not just the identity, but recognizing that you are more than that identity. And that
Mm-hmm.
you do influence exactly what your identity is, but you do it by making the right choices. And sometimes we get so engaged,
Mm-hmm.
involved, that we're not aware of why we're doing what we're doing, or even if what we're doing is good for us, never mind looking beyond us. Is it really any good for anybody? Is it
Yeah.
serving anybody? Is it helping humanity? Is it supporting the world?
Mm-hmm.
We get lost in all of that. But that is part of what youth is allowed to do, I think. You have come to a place, from my perspective, you've come to a
Mm-hmm.
place very early. And the question will be, I know I was kind of hanging out there in that frame of mind
Mm-hmm.
when I was a teenager too, and I stepped away from it. But maybe you'll stay with this because you seem committed. The fact that you're doing this wonderful broadcast or podcast for people to be a youth, to be able to be inspired by what you're
Mm-hmm.
finding and what you're experiencing, and those ideas become suggestions for other people to get a taste of, and then to try and maybe make their life a little easier because they let go of some of the things that aren't really helping them, and they find
Mm-hmm.
things that will help them. And I am a very, as you know, strong believer in meditation. As to me, it's the best medication. But it's also the one thing that everybody can do anytime, anywhere, doesn't cost anything, and you really don't need any teaching.
Mm-hmm.
People have a perception about that. And I think it's the simplest thing I've ever learned in my life.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you very much for that. Yeah. That's definitely brilliant. About like meditation in itself. Yeah, no, it very much is. As you said, you don't need anything to do it, and it's meditation is the best medication. And that is so true. This being said, I don't want to be hypocritical. I like, with full honesty, full disclosure, like I haven't properly meditated in too long. But I know that when I do, things definitely seem to get better. There's a load that I'm bearing that I can take from a different perspective. It would be like if you had a weaker arm and a stronger arm, but you only know about the weaker arm and you're using it to carry everything when you also have the stronger arm, if that makes sense. And the meditation is kind of how you find out that, holy crap, my other arm's pretty strong too. I can do something with it.
I think that's an excellent analogy. It's being aware of more than a narrow focus. It's the opportunity to be aware of everything about yourself. And it is only an opportunity, I mean, what we take away from it is it can just sit there on wherever we meditate, the rock, the cushion, the chair. If we take away what we gain from that opportunity and we allow that to then come into our life on that day and the next day, whatever, that's mindfulness.
Yeah.
And then we can apply mindfulness to everything that we do, and then everything that we do becomes more mindful. And my joke is always about, well, gee, I'm sitting on a cushion so that I have no thoughts, which is very difficult. You can't stop them, but it's even difficult to go into a moment of no thoughts. And when I'm in that place of no thoughts, sitting on that cushion thinking, is this all that it's going to be? Am I going to get anything from this?
Yeah.
Do I need this? All those thoughts start to come in. And then when it's all over, you take whatever arose, whatever came up, you take it into that next moment and know that there was meaning by being there on that spot, on that place, but it's really inside yourself, whatever your capital S higher self is in your perception. I'd like to circle back though, because it's been on my mind to ask you, when you say you haven't been meditating for a long time or a while, what do you perceive meditation is for you?
That's a great question, because it is a very, meditation in itself is a pretty, I guess, abstract concept in some ways, because there's no right way to do it. But to me, you might have just blown a hole in everything that I just said, because I kind of lied in that. I haven't sat down and dedicated time to meditating in the way that I guess I used to. But I have found myself, and I don't even do it almost subconsciously. Like I'm aware of it. But I find myself, when I'm not doing anything, and we actually chatted about this earlier, when I'm not doing anything, I find myself, if it's finding a point in a room and just sitting and watching the thoughts come through my head and not trying to provoke anything, while I'm waiting for, say, a friend to pick me up or something, or while I literally don't have anything to do. Like it's mostly in those situations where I'm waiting. I do find myself kind of drifting into that, and it's almost like I could look on my phone. I know what's going to be there. It's boring. I'm going to get that 3-second dopamine rush of looking at my phone, seeing Instagram or seeing Snapchat, seeing there's a notification. I click on it, and then it's gone. And that was 30 seconds of the 10 minutes that I'm going to be sitting here. So, like, cool, but I'm just going to want to look at my phone again. So, if I can take that time, just sit down and look off into focus on a point, or just to meditate, I guess.
And there you go. Okay, Ryden, you just came back in.
Oh, did I cut out for a while?
Yes, and now it's my internet.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, because I saw that you froze for a bit. How much did you get of that?
The last part was after you checked the phone and you had, out of your 10 minutes, you were doing something.
So yeah, sorry, as I was saying, so it's like you check your phone and all you're going to want to do is check it again, because You're thinking like, oh, there's going to be something different on it this time, or this time it's going to be, I'm going to get that one message, which is going to satiate me for the next, but it won't.
Okay, so the whole electronic device and the world today, that is a full podcast in itself. But I think if I understand where you were going with that, or where you hinted at, is that there are a lot of moments during the day that you could take advantage of that time to be aware of what's going on within you, versus externally looking for something to fill your pleasures or whatever.
For
and
sure.
I agree. I think every little bit of time that you can find and be mindful and observing is a form of a meditation. It's not going to take you, I shouldn't say it won't, it might. But my experience has still been, in the end, those are all valuable, useful, but they're also somewhat more preparatory. And then there is the time where you truly dedicate to be with yourself, without distractions, without any expectation for whatever time you decide to sit aside. And then at the end of that time, you've done what you've done, you become aware what you become aware of, you take it forward. And that is very different than, grabbing. And I do a lot of the little, not so much grabbing, but taking moments whenever I can. I think that's very useful. But what's invaluable is that quiet silence in the stillness.
Yeah. And I think that's what I mean by I haven't meditated in a while. Because I've been doing the moment to moment grabbing some time and using it to just go into that meditative state when I do have downtime, but I haven't taken that alone time in a while. And usually when I haven't, I can tell the negative repercussions in my mind in a certain way, or I can tell that my mind's a little more active. Not that being active is necessarily a bad thing, but active in a more negative way, or it's take me out of the moment, if that makes sense. If I don't take time to
thank you for the clarification, because there are no bad things that come up within us. They are just perceptions to inform us, so that we don't go out and do bad things. I think that was a good clarification of meditation. I think it's a good opportunity to have that understanding. Now, there's a lot more to understanding what we could say about all the different kinds of meditations. There's so many different kinds, but one thing we learn, especially when we're doing those little moments that we have, is to just be aware of the breath and take the breath and give the breath and just keep taking and giving. And if we can just do that, then that is, to me, that's the best meditation. Wherever we are, whenever we can, and more so when we're on the silent, still place.
Yeah, no, I love that. So I ask you then, and this is kind of a point that I've come to in my journey, and I'm still trying to kind of figure out, but what is awareness then? Because awareness is, I think, like a very kind of Western way of looking at awareness is focus. It's almost used as a synonym for focus in a certain way, but focus is very tuned in directly, whereas my knowledge of awareness is more a holistic view of what's going on. So if you could elaborate on that a bit.
Yes, and having asked that question of teachers over the years a number of times. So today I find that awareness for me there's the relative awareness, as you just said, it's focusing. What am I aware of? Like, am I aware of my water's right here? I'm aware my throat's getting a little dry. That's awareness. Those are like the little details of being in this experience of doing a podcast and having a body mind. But then there's the awareness that we find when we are in stillness and silence, that is more than the body mind, And I'm closing my eyes here, and I'm going to give you a suggestion you might choose to too.
I already am.
To feel a place, and we're just feeling into, we're not going to get anywhere, we're not going anywhere, we're just feeling into this spaciousness that is the understanding that we are more than this body, we are more than this mind. This beautiful body mind has all these human expressions of emotions and et cetera, et cetera. And as we're aware of those things, we're still in the relative awareness, but eventually there's this kind of, it's like a transcendence to a field of awareness that is
Mhm.
beyond, but still of. And it feels different. And when we can feel the difference between just being Bryden and Lanny in these bodies,
Mhm.
then we get the taste. I love the glimpses I get of what is this field of awareness. It's a presence that is the bigger than the body mind. People call it an energy. People call it love. I
Mhm.
call it love.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
And then when we're in that field and we feel that, then that is the absolute awareness with a capital A.
Mhm.
And that awareness is what we bring back into our everyday awareness.
Okay. Yeah, sorry. I'm almost a little bit addicted to this whole sitting with my eyes closed here thing. It's really wonderful.
Give yourself a clap, rub your face, rub your eyes, palm your eyes,
Oh,
massage the
better. All
palm,
right. I'm
bring it back
back.
to the ground.
I feel
Yeah,
so
it's
aware
easy
now.
to go off. But we're not really going
Yeah.
off.
Hmm.
We're just expanding. There's a difference.
Yeah.
We had a quick blip about the astral plane. There is that going off.
Yeah.
For me, the work is being fully present in this experience and
Hmm.
in the field of awareness, the big presence.
Yeah. No, that's yeah, and that's a great way to look at it, because I guess a lot of people think, or I guess there's this like notion that um when you're meditating, you're almost like unaware or you're shut off. Like and that was my way that I looked at it. I used to wake up every single morning, and the first thing that I would do was I'd sit down for 10 minutes straight. I'd even set a timer for myself, which was, I don't think that that's a great way to sit down and meditate, but I'd sit down for 10 minutes straight and try to absolutely shut down every single thought, awareness, and everything, thinking that that was what meditation, quote unquote, was, when I'm only starting to learn now that it's far more. And I used to think that I'd always have to sit in lotus position and meditate, when now I've realized that there's shavasana, or you can even just literally lay down on your bed and get into that state.
Although laying
Yeah.
down on your bed in the morning is probably going to take you back into deep state, not waking awareness state.
Yeah. So
I call
sorry.
that now. And this is the
Yeah.
joy of being retired. You can call anything meditation any moment. And yeah, no, you do tend to fall asleep. And daydreaming too, like the bus stops, like you were saying,
Mhm.
there's a minute and you have a choice. Well, in that choice, you can daydream. And it's not, there's advantages to that. It's not meditating, but again, it's good
Mhm.
preparation. So, however you're doing it, or whenever you're doing something that you think you're paying attention, but you're right, you can't stop the thoughts.
Mhm. Sorry, we have 30 seconds
Okay.
till our break. But yeah, as you were saying.
You can't stop the thoughts. And I'll tell you a little thing about that. I don't think it'll take more than 10 seconds. But even the greatest Zen meditators and all of the
Mhm.
yogis and the seers, they too they don't stop thoughts. They can only
Yeah.
meditate maybe only 5 minutes with no thoughts.
Yeah.
Then they start again.
So, welcome to the second part of this wonderful podcast with Lanny Brown. So you were talking about stopping your thoughts, and the greatest, how some of the greatest Zen meditators can't manage to do that for more than mere moments. If you'd like to go a little bit deeper on that.
Well, and this has been passed on to me from somebody I consider an enlightened master. His knowledge was that most masters of meditation are not able to sit some, minutes, some 5 minutes maybe, but then thoughts arise with them. So we have to recognize that we're not there to stop the thoughts. There is an outcome of thoughts not being as commanding and demanding. However, our objective when we sit in meditation is in stillness and silence, is to experience more stillness and silence, and just know that the thoughts, if we aren't disturbed by them, they're just going to come and go, and they're in the background, and they don't attract us like they used to. And I love the expression, they come by and we don't hop on the train.
Yeah, well, that's brilliant.
We get caught.
Sometimes we do, yeah. Sometimes we do, and then end up jumping onto the tracks accidentally. And it doesn't end too well for us, but
yeah, no splattering here of the mind.
No
anyway, we can't do that. But the idea to remember is that if you have that as an objective, it's going to be frustrating. So where meditation is simple and not frustrating is you just sit with whatever's happening. Now, to have an object of your meditation makes it so much easier. In the beginning, and even when you've been meditating for a long time, there are days that I love, like I'm right back to candle watching. And I started that recently because that's anchoring my mind again. It's working for me at the time. So if I have that to focus on, and if I have the breath to watch the coming and going, and if I count my breaths, and if I say a mantra, there's so many tools that I can use to help anchor my mind in a way that I will stay focused and not, jump on the cloud of that wonderful story that where are we going with that one? And so that's a good idea. Just have something to anchor you, but also to not have the expectation that you have the ability to stop thoughts.
And I think
they're in the matrix. They're in the matrix. You can't stop
You're in the matrix. You can't stop. That's a great way to look at it. Because and I think that I can kind of relate that to my life, I guess, because with me, I didn't realize that you can get drunk on pain and drunk on happiness. And it was, I guess, tie it back to Alan Watts. I was listening to him, and he speaks of polarity in the sense that in order for any emotion to exist, an opposite must exist with it. So like a positive emotion must have a negative emotion, and that goes into the world. Day must have night in order to exist. And I think one of the things that maybe we overlook, and I'd love to hear your input on this, maybe we overlook is the fact that we might be jumping on those sad trains way harder than we're jumping on the happy ones, because we might feel like the happy ones, that we have to be skeptic of them, if that makes sense.
Yes, and it's our effort, it's our mind that makes the effort to make a choice. And for every negative that can exist whenever we are aware of it in our experience, there is the positive. And positive can be very different for any person on any day, any situation. If we're taking, what is the opposite of anger for someone? If you're feeling anger, on any given moment, I could then say, okay, the opposite of anger for me right now, I'm feeling the anger, and I'm not going to push it away. I am going to own it. It's my anger. It's not, nobody made me feel angry, no matter what the trigger out there was. I feel anger. I'm owning it. I'm going to feel it wherever it is in my body. I'm going to be aware of whatever's co-arising in my thoughts of my mind and pictures, images, etc., sensations. But I'm also going to say, well, what's the other side of that? What do I want to see on the opposite side? And anger could be acceptance. Yeah. Could be frustration even. That could be negative, but it might be a positive in the moment, because if I can just go from anger to frustration, that's going to bring my anger down. So maybe I'm
Yeah.
just going to feel frustration is positive for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe it's going to be the ultimate place of peace and love.
Yeah.
And so I want to embrace both of those experiences. And it's the holding of them at the same time. And this actually comes from physics, and I'm not a physicist to explain it, but wave mechanics. And if you've got the vibration of anger and you invite in to feel, fully be in that feeling for you of peace, then the peace will, negate the anger.
Cancel the anger. Yeah, there'll be, I'm a math guy. They'll be 90 degrees out of phase.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's an awesome way to look at it. I know that with myself, I do something I have done. And when I say I have, of course, I find myself jumping on the train all the time. But something that has worked for me, that's helped stop me jump on that train, is to, before reacting to that feeling, is to look at it and then almost like become it. Like, in a way, I guess you could call it taunting. And it's something that I've kind of come to, is like, you're feeling a little bit anxious or you're feeling a little bit angry. And like, I'll say to myself, like, how angry can you get? Keep getting angry, keep getting anxious, whatever it is. And I say that to myself. And then I realize I can't get any worse than this. I really can't control it. But in a way, if I can't get any more angry, is that feeling of anger really quite, I don't want to say valid, but is it something that I should hop on if I can't, control it, maybe? If that makes sense.
If I understand,
It's like building on, yeah.
If I do understand that, it's like you're accepting that there's anger and you're accepting the feeling of the anger. But if you were to try to create more than what exists, you're getting a sense that you're losing control of the anger. Is that
maybe? It's very internal, so it's hard to explain, but it's almost like you're looking at that anger. Let's imagine that anger is a person, and you're looking at it in the face and you're going, like, become more yourself, become more yourself, become more yourself, become more angry. And then it gets so big and so big and so big. I think they call it, there's like something similar, like building the fire, that it burns out its own fuel in a way, if that makes sense. That you've let it become so much that it just kind of, you realize that it can't become anything more because there's no more fuel for that anger, and that it can just dissolve away. If that makes sense. That these are still concepts that I'm playing with.
There are tools, psychological tools that have worked on that premise of feeding the fuel until you get to a place where there's no more to be felt. I don't know. I'm gonna step back on that one because it's a little out of my realm of the way I understand working with intense emotions.
That's fair.
But I'll throw in a little story. I can remember the Dalai Lama, of course, is one of probably my most favorite teacher that I have enjoyed over my lifetime so far. And I remember working with anger a lot in earlier years, and read a book, read an article. He narrows it down to a story. And he says, we all get angry at times. We just have to recognize our anger. And he said, if we do something to create more than what we already have, then that's what we're putting out beyond ourselves into the world. So we don't want to increase anything more than what we have within ourselves. So it's only owning what we have. So there are things we can do to make our anger greater. There are also things we can do to make the anger within us be more of a feeling sense. Yeah. But what I liked about him is when he said, when we're angry, there are actions we can take.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, when my birds were into my my field and they were eating my, my vegetables or whatever, he said, I was angry.
Yeah.
So he said, I knew I had to take action. I dealt with my anger, but I still had to take the action. And my action out of my anger was to shoot an air gun in the sky. He who
I love
cannot
that.
hurt a fly,
Yeah.
but he could shoot the air gun. So there is action that will come out of whatever degree of anger we are ready to recognize, feel, and own.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think we want, and I could be confusing what you were saying, Brian. I don't think we want
Yeah.
to find ways to create more.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's fair. And I don't know. I don't think I really did justice to it. And it might be, hey, it might be a conversation for another time for me to put it together properly. But it's just an idea that I've been playing with. So yeah, no, I love I love that analogy though that you gave, and it's brilliant. So I guess moving on, another kind of question that I had, and I want kind of your view on, is that there's this pretty well-known idea that if to know that you're not going through something alone can take some load off you, make it easier to know that you're not going through a phase of depression, or that you're not going through the loss of a family member alone. There are other people too who are in that same position, can be very comforting. But with that, there comes a point, and I found myself in it, where you start to realize, like, the curtain's been lifted off of everyone. You start to realize, like, holy crap, everyone's going through this. And that can be really good if you bring that energy to the right place. But then there's also this other side where you can go kind of nihilistic and start to think, like, oh, there's no point to everything because I'm never going to be happy, and everything's just struggling. Like, I'm just going to constantly suffer. And there's a hopelessness that can be derived from that as well. So how would you, what's your view on addressing that hopelessness, I guess?
Yes, depression, despair, hopelessness. But a lot of that going around the world these days. And yeah, I mean, we're never alone in anything we're experiencing. And probably now more than ever, I would say that we're probably more together than we ever have been in the world with this experience. And we're still all in different places on it.
For sure.
Yet that being said, I understand, yeah, when we are individually, like you and I was, and others are in those places that we're feeling the aloneness, even though intellectually we may say, oh yeah, I know I'm not alone, but it feels like we're alone.
Oh yeah.
And that comes back to almost like the anger and action analogy with the Dalai Lama, taking action. Sometimes we don't feel we know what to do. Sometimes we don't feel like we can be bothered. I had a CBB, was one of my little internal triggers or warnings, because when I heard myself saying can't be bothered, and that would be like letting me know, this is taking me into a downward place. I don't want to go there. So why not? Why aren't I reaching out? Why don't we find someone else that we know we're not alone? Why don't we find a way?
Yeah.
And there is I think it's a belief that when we're in those places, there's the concern, stigma that we don't want people to know that we're not handling things. We are in those hopeless, desperate places.
Because that's powerful. We all want to show our best selves.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I guess we don't realize that part of our best selves is, well, in that word, in the words best selves, there's selves, and there's so many more aspects there. But yeah.
Yeah, and it's the vulnerability of recognizing that because we're not alone, There are others that are going through this, but there's also others that have been there, done that, and can help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so that's what we look for. And again, this is, for me, the meditation experience was invaluable when I was going through, what's known in the spiritual trainings and teachings as the dark night of the soul. I didn't know it was a plural. When I learned about it, I thought it was the singular event, but it turned out there's more than one sometimes. But, it's knowing that if we have a dedication to our higher self, our meditation, that what we'll do is we will sit with whatever our greatest problem, difficulty, challenge of the day or month or year is. And I spent a whole year in laying still on the floor with this question. What is it I need to do? What is it I need to know?
Yeah.
And if we can sit in silence and stillness and trust that eventually we will get the answer, we will get, something will show up in our mind, something will show up in our heart, something will show up synchronistically because there are no coincidences.
Yeah.
And there it'll be the answer for us that will help us. And when we're in that meditative state, we will know what to do next. I always say it's all about time and money. Where do I spend my time? How do I spend my money? It's really energy, but money is the biggest form of energy. Reaching out to people. And if I can figure out, I don't even have to figure it out. It'll come to you in a meditation if you ask. And that is, to me, the solution or the stepping stone to a solution for the worst we can ever feel, the worst place we can ever be.
Yeah, is just reaching out to another person.
Eventually.
Yeah,
That's the
eventually,
action that comes out of the meditation that tells you, informs you of where to go and what to do and how to do it.
And I guess that's one of those things that you always hear with like mental health campaigns, especially like in schools and stuff like that. You always hear like, it's okay to reach out, like it's okay to feel. But then there's something almost a little like disgenuine about that. It doesn't feel quite, it feels a little off because, as you were saying, it's an external person telling you, or this is what I take from what you're saying, is that it has to be an internal feeling, the reaching out. Like it has to be an internal motivation for it to really.
It comes from there. People, I don't know, help is another 4-letter word I struggle with. I told you that time is my favorite 4-letter word.
Yeah.
Help is one of the ones I'm kind of confused about, because I don't think anybody can fix anyone else. I think everybody wants to help other people.
Yeah.
But what does that 4-letter word mean? And it's the whole thing of the hand out versus the hand up philosophy. And I think, again, because this is the youth that this podcast is being presented for, I'm going back in my memory, which I still have some, and I was invincible when I was a teenager, and I'm sure that power of invincibility makes it very difficult to feel the empowerment of vulnerability.
Yeah.
It's actually the vulnerability that is required in order to really be with your own raw, honest needs and feelings.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point that you raise, is how strong vulnerability is, or how powerful vulnerability is. Because that invincibility feeling, that's what I lived with for so damn long. Like, I think really up until there's a very defining moment that broke it for me. And it was up until the summer after 10th grade for me, where I was working at summer camp in a high stress environment, working with kids for upwards of 12 hours a day. And in that state, I was constantly tired. I was constantly out of it. And I got to a point where I broke. And prior to breaking, I had this idea in my head that, oh, I'm mentally tough. And I'm like this, I can muscle through it or whatever. A very, like, I hate to say meathead attitude, but it was a very meathead attitude. And yeah, in that moment, I like came to. It was as if someone had just like punched me straight in the face, and I was laying on the ground, and I was like, "Oh, I'm not invincible anymore." And then I kind of like struggled with that. I didn't come to accept it, and I've only started to come to accept it really, I guess, in the past year, that vulnerability, but it still can be so scary.
Mm.
And I can only imagine that for people who, for a lot of people, it's probably even more scary than it's been for me, because I'm only starting to come to the mildest of terms with it, maybe. Um, but yeah, no, it's scary to be vulnerable.
And we learn from our experiences more than we can ever learn from anyone else's experiences. And yet, that being said, you just sharing that experience will help others either before they go into it, while they're in it, or after they've had it,
Yeah.
to understand that it is just their experience and
Mhm.
what's going to come out of it for them. You
Yeah.
know, are they going to be able to play that polarity of invincibility and vulnerability
Mhm.
in a way that's going to be leading them towards equanimity, which is kind
Yeah.
of where we all want to be someday, somehow, if we
For
try.
sure.
We
Yeah,
meditate
because like,
and do all of these things
yeah.
just so we can have the flavor of equanimity, you know, and then
Yeah.
eventually we get more and more of it because it's in our intention and it becomes part of our field of awareness.
Mhm.
And, you know, yeah, we all have times where we're headstrong.
Yeah.
I'll just tell you, I have a
Mhm.
mentor who told me yesterday, she said, so you're not so much like you used to be that you wanted it your way. Now, she hasn't talked to me for like 8 years. So I said, yeah,
Yeah.
no, that's one of the things about all the gray hair, you know, and the wrinkles and all that. You do mellow. It's nice to mellow. But if somebody had told me, if I'd had this podcast when I was a teenager,
Mhm.
and, you know, it was my mistake to put Alan Watts on the back burner when I was a teenager, but I did.
Yeah.
No regrets, but a good man,
Yeah.
good work. But I would think a podcast like this would have inspired me to have, you know, certainly maybe stuck with the idea of the meditation. I mean, I tried it again in my mid-20s. I didn't really
Mhm.
commit to it till later. And I think recognizing that there's nothing wrong with being headstrong for the experience.
Mhm.
And at some point in time, if you aren't aware of certain things coming up in your feelings and emotions and your thoughts, you're going to get to a point where having that strength is going to take you to the ground.
Yeah, because
So
it's
that's where
it.
you were, and that's because you
Yeah.
had the strength to get there.
Yeah. No, that's. Oh my God, that's brilliant. It's that strength. It's almost like the metaphorical. Yeah, the metaphorical uh, gun, your gun that's being turned towards you, if that makes sense, by
Yes.
someone else. Yeah, like the classic movie scene where there's the good guy, and he's holding the bad guy at gunpoint, and then the bad guy grabs his arm and turns it back on him. You know, like it's got the same amount of power, that weapon, but it can go both ways. Just your mind gives you the illusion that it only goes your way, I guess.
And that's a very good metaphor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Um, so we have about 3.5 minutes left. So I wanted to
Well,
ask
if you can
you.
hear me,
Yeah, I can hear you.
no,
Yeah.
you had gone silent, and I didn't know if it was an internet issue.
Oh no, can you hear me now?
I can.
Awesome. Yeah. So we have about 3.5 minutes left. So with that time, is there really a message that you'd like to send out to young people who will be listening to this podcast? Really, if they could take away anything from this, what would it be?
Well, I think reiterating what we were just finishing on is recognize that you all have invincibility within you and vulnerability within you. And
Hmm.
It's which one is going to be strong and when, and which one are you going to rely on to take you forward? Which one is going to be the most serving?
Yeah.
And I believe that one of the things that is most important about getting to know yourself and your strengths and your weaknesses, if you want to call them that, is the recognition that for every positive or every negative, there is a positive. And any time that you have a feeling that is in your perception for yourself is a negative, find the opposite and hold them both, be with them both, and acknowledge that they're both parts of you and in that moment, and then allow the one that you want to see more of expand and work with that one and develop it and cultivate it. And I used to love the phrase effortless effort. It was one I used for years because I really like the idea of not having to work too hard at anything. But now I like joyful effort.
Yeah.
If we are going to make an effort, then every effort we make, if we can find some joy in it, knowing that that is going to be the direction that's going to take us out of the negative space and into the positive place. And there we're going to be able to, pass it on, play it forward. And I think meditation is our most valuable tool. I've learned a new mantra recently that there's magic in the mundane, and meditation is a mundane experience. It's just sitting, watching.
I love that. Thank you so much, Lanee. I really appreciated you coming on here. Like that conversation was so great, and it definitely put a light in my day, a light brighter than the very bright one that's shining on my face right now in the studio. And yeah, it was super insightful. And yeah, thank you so much for coming on.
Well, thank you, Bryden. Thank you for what you're doing. And thank you for particularly taking this focus out for the youth. It is a passion of mine as well. If there's anything more I can do to support you in your joyful effort and keeping the perseverance for anyone that's interested in this community, I'm always available. I'll make myself available. Thank
you so much, Lanee.
Namaste.
Namaste. Thank you so much for listening to Labyrinth of Thought. That was Lanee Brown. I'm so grateful to have her as my first guest. She's a wonderful, wonderful lady and an extremely knowledgeable meditation teacher. I hope that you could gain something from this, like I sure as hell did. And yeah, thank you very much for listening to Labyrinth of Thought with Bryden Cardillo. Take it easy.